You're watching the MMA Oracles Podcast, and now, presenting your host, Jack Moon.
And we're back with episode 3 of the MMA Oracles Podcast. I am your host, Jack Moon, and the last event was an absolute disaster. Probably my worst night of picks of all time, so I'm not even going to get into it. Let's just jump ahead right into this next card, and I gotta say, it's pretty awful. It's another Apex card in Vegas, and it is shit, really. It is headlined by a middleweight bout between Roman Dolidze and Nassourdine Imavov, and we will get into that later. I'm going to go ahead and start right at the bottom of the card with the first fight of the night, which is a heavyweight bout between Thomas the Train Peterson making his UFC debut against Jamal the Stormtrooper Pogues. This is a really low-end heavyweight fight. Both guys could potentially be cut down to 205. Pogues has fought at 205 in the past, but at heavyweight, these guys are pretty bottom of the barrel. Peterson's making his debut. He just won on the Contender Series with his first ever submission win. He is 8-1 overall with 7 knockouts and 1 submission. That submission was the one I just mentioned on the Contender Series, which was over a pretty low-end opponent in Chandler Cole. He is a former LFA champion. His best wins are over Chandler Cole, which is not good, and Vernon Lewis, which won him that LFA title. On the other side, we got Jamal Pogues, who is 10-4 overall with 4 knockouts, 1 submission, and 5 decisions. He went 2-0 on the Contender Series before getting a contract. He's got a good team behind him at Syndicate MMA, and he previously trained at Joe Stevenson's Cobra Kai, so he is training with some higher level fighters. His best wins are over Kyle Noblet, Marcos Bragago, Tim Hiley, Paulo Renato Jr., and Josh Parisian. And he is a former CCW champion. Pogues is now 1-1 in the UFC. He's coming off a decision loss to Mick Parkin, and he beat the aforementioned Josh Parisian in his UFC debut. Pogues does have a height and reach advantage in this fight, as well as an experience advantage. He's definitely fought the better competition, and he's got a better team behind him. Despite all of that, Peterson is coming in as a minus 195 moderate favorite, while Pogues is a plus 165 slight underdog. I do feel Pogues is being underestimated a bit here. I think he is the bigger fighter. I think he could. He's also the more explosive athlete. But really, I've never had a very high opinion on him. I do feel he would be better served cutting down to 205. That division is really wide open. And I think he can maybe make some waves there and be a better gatekeeper there than at heavyweight. Peterson is an all-offense fighter. He's defensively lacking, which worries me a little bit, especially in this fight. But I don't know if Pogues is the type of guy to exploit it. We did see some improvements from Peterson in his Contender Series fight. It's really tough to judge how much he has improved, though, because he was fighting such a low-level opponent in Chandler Cole. Cole is just a really short, fat guy that shouldn't be at heavyweight. Like I mentioned, I've never really had a high opinion of Jamal Pogues. But I wouldn't call this a lock. I'm not too high on Peterson either. Peterson's output, I think, is going to be the difference maker in this fight, and his wrestling. I think he'll be able to just consistently move forward and kind of keep Pogues defensive and trying to get him off, is where I don't think Pogues is ever really going to get his game going. Peterson has finished all of his pro wins, but I think we're going to see him go to a decision this time. I think Pogues is good enough to not get finished, but I don't think he's good enough to stop Peterson and kind of take him out of his game. So I expect Pogues to be kind of kept defensive and Peterson to have a higher output and edge out the rounds. So for my official pick, it will be Thomas the Train Peterson by unanimous decision. The next fight of the night is a lightweight pairing between Landon the Lone Wolf Quinones and Markel Medeiros. Medeiros is making his UFC debut here after winning on the Contender Series, and he looked really impressive on the Contender Series. I will get into him in a minute. In the red corner, we have Quinones, who is 28 years old. He is 7-2-1 overall with 5 knockouts, 1 submission, and 1 decision victory. He was on Team McGregor on Tough 31. He lost his only fight in the house by submission to Jason Knight in just 55 seconds. He took Jason Knight down, basically dove right into his guard and right into a triangle choke. It was sort of an embarrassing and frustrating loss for him. He did get to make his UFC debut after that, but he took a short notice fight against Nasrat Haqparast, who was clearly way more experienced, and he ended up dropping a decision in that fight. He did show some improvement, though, and he showed that his striking is pretty decent because he was able to land some shots on Haqparast, but he lost a pretty clear decision as well. He is a former Titan FC champ. He doesn't really have any notable wins, nobody worth mentioning, but he does have a great team behind him at Killcliff FC, and the competition he was facing so far in his career hasn't been extremely low. It's just no names worth mentioning, but he's fought decent competition. On the other side, we have Medeiros, who is 27 years old. He is 8-1 overall with 6 knockouts and 2 decisions. He looked really good on the Contender Series. He fought Isa Isakov, who was really just trying to wrestle him and hold on to him, but he did a great job to keep him off and defend those takedowns and then just keep attacking, and he eventually got the finish late in the first round. He's also got a great team behind him as well at Factory X Muay Thai. So this is a pairing between 2 younger prospects in the lightweight division who both have something to prove here, so this should be a pretty good fight. Medeiros is the minus 175 slight favorite, while Quinones is the plus 150 slight underdog. Currently, there's 1,846 picks on Tapology. 74% of those are favoring Medeiros, with 59% of the vote favoring him to win by knockout. Of the 34% who have Quinones, 56% of those are favoring him to win by decision. Like I said, these are both young prospects, so they're actually somewhat similar fighters. Both young guys, both have a great team behind them. Both are mainly strikers. So I see this being a good fight, but one of them is going to have to do something to kind of edge it out for themselves to win the judges over or put a stamp on this fight. And each fighter does have something in their pocket to do so. For Quinones, I think it's his aggression. He will go at you and he will just throw strikes and kind of not care about his own well-being almost. He's an aggressive fighter, and I think that can win him some rounds and do some damage. On the other side, I think Medeiros is probably the smarter fighter. He's got better fight IQ. He's better defensive, so I think he'll know when to attack, when to defend, and how to win those rounds and edge them out in his favor. With that being said, I'm actually favoring Medeiros because of that fight IQ, because I think he will know how to win the rounds. He'll know how to counter the aggression of Quinones, and he'll know when to defend and when to push the pace. And I think I see him edging this out and getting the judge's decision at the end. I know a lot of people are expecting him to finish Quinones, but Quinones has never been knocked out, and he's a young guy and he's going to be aggressive. So I don't see Medeiros being able to kind of land a counter to put him away, but I see him being able to land counters to hurt him and do enough to get the round. So my official pick will be Markel Medeiros by unanimous decision. On to the third fight of the night, and this one is a shit fight. This is a women's flyweight bout between Julija Stoliarenko and Luana Dread Carolina. Both of these fighters are likely on the UFC chopping block. They're both low-end flyweights. You're not going to see either one of them ranked or fighting their way into contention anytime soon, and I don't think ever, really. Stoliarenko is 11-7-1 overall. She's got 10 submissions and 1 decision. She is currently 2-5 in the UFC. She lost on her only fight in Tough 28 to Pani Kianzad, and she also lost in her UFC debut to Leah Letson, and then she was cut from the promotion. She returned to the UFC later on and lost 3 more fights in a row to Yana Santos, Julia Avila, and Alexis Davis. She then rebounded with a win over Jessica Rose Clark, who has since been cut and was pretty awful. She then lost to Chelsea Chandler, but she's since rebounded with a first-round submission victory over Molly McCann in a fight that it looked like she was set up to lose. But Molly McCann's grappling is so atrocious that she basically put herself into the submission. Stoliarenko has a low-end team. She's got low-end wins, and she's 30 years old. There's no real upside here. She is moving down to flyweight, so maybe that does something for her, but I don't really see that fixing any of the problems that she's had so far in her career. On the other side, we have Carolina, who is 9-4 overall, with 2 knockout victories, 1 submission, and 6 decisions. She is currently 4-3 in the UFC. She won a fight on the Contender Series to earn her UFC contract, and then she beat Priscilla Cachoeira in her UFC debut. She also has wins over Poliana Botelho, Lupita Godinez, Ivana Petrovic, and her losses have come to Ariane Lipsky, Molly McCann, and Joanne Wood. Stoliarenko is the -120 near even favorite, while Carolina is sitting at a +100 near even underdog. There's currently 1,877 Tapology picks. 73% of those picks are favoring Stoliarenko. Of that 73%, 74% is favoring her to win by submission. Of the 27% favoring Carolina to win, 83% of those are picking decision. And that's really pretty much how I see this fight going. Stoliarenko is really an all-or-nothing fighter. She's going to try and get that submission at all costs. She is an armbar specialist, and I think she's going to just go right after Carolina. And if she can get her to the floor, she'll probably get the submission and win. But if not, Carolina might outwork her and kind of just beat her up and keep her at bay. So not a great fight. Hopefully Stoliarenko can get it done so we don't have to watch this fight very long. And I think she will. I don't see Carolina having the best fight IQ. She doesn't have the best defense either. I think she's going to make a mistake, and I think Stoliarenko will get her down and get that submission locked up within 2 rounds. So my official pick will be Julija Stoliarenko by first round submission. Next up, we have a featherweight pairing between the Korean Tiger Zhang Yong Lee and Blake El Animal Builder. Lee is 28 years old. He is 10-1 overall with 4 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 3 decision victories. He was the winner of the first season of the Road to the UFC tournament, and this is his first fight since winning that tournament. He's beat some decent opponents, but I think this is still going to be a big step up in competition for him here because most of the opponents he had been fighting were sort of on the Asia regional scene, and we've seen that when fighters transition from that to the UFC, they tend to struggle a little bit. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. And Builder, he's a fighter that can really test Lee. So I think this is going to be an interesting fight. Bilder is already 33 years old. He is 8-1-1 overall. He's got 1 TKO victory, 4 submissions, and 3 decisions. He is currently 1-1 in the UFC after coming to the UFC through the Contender Series. He took a decision over Shane Young in his UFC debut, but then he dropped a decision to Kyle Nelson in his second outing. Lee is currently sitting as a minus 130 slight favorite, while Blake Bilder is at a plus 110 near even underdog. Lee sort of underwhelmed a bit in his UFC debut. He was fighting in the finals of the road to the UFC tournament, and he had been crushing his opponents up to that point. And he fought Yi Zha, and he ended up going to a split decision to win the tournament. Probably not the victory he wanted, but it's better than nothing. On the other side, Bilder has also kind of underwhelmed and disappointed in his UFC career so far. He took that decision victory over Shane Young. He looked pretty good, but I kind of would have liked to see him push the pace and maybe try and get Shane Young out of there. Shane Young wasn't a very good fighter. He's since also been cut. Kyle Nelson was his second opponent in the UFC, and Kyle Nelson sort of had one foot out the door already. He was like 1-4 or something like that in the UFC, and it seemed like Bilder was gonna to get the win there. He came into that fight as the favorite, but he really dropped the ball, and he couldn't get it done against Kyle Nelson. He was a minus 280 favorite going into that fight, but like I mentioned, couldn't get it done. Really underwhelmed. I was really disappointed with him in that performance. I don't think he performed to the best of his abilities. I think we could see a much better version of him here, which makes me a little bit cautious on picking Lee because he is, like I mentioned, a bit unproven, having fought mostly overseas. So I see a lot of people favoring Lee. Currently, there are 1,890 Tapology picks. 75% of those are picking Lee. Of that 75%, 68 are expecting him to win a decision. And of the 25% picking Bilder, 69% of those are also picking decisions. So I pretty much agree with that. I don't see a finish in this fight. I don't think either guy is going to be able to kind of overwhelm the other one to get the stoppage. I don't think either one really has the tools to put the other one away. I am leaning a bit towards Lee, but Bilder is a live underdog here. I wouldn't be surprised if he pulled it off. Bilder he's a well-rounded fighter. I just don't see him being good enough anywhere to really give Lee the pause that he's going to have to kind of stop his attack. I think Lee is probably the better striker. I think he's probably the better wrestler. Bilder is probably the better grappler. So there is some caution there, but I think Lee is going to be able to lead the dance and win the rounds here. So my official pick will be Zhang Yang Lee by unanimous decision. We are at a welterweight pairing on this card between Temba the Answer Garimbo and Pete Dead Game Rodriguez. Rodriguez is taking this fight on somewhat short notice. He's replacing Kiefer Crosby, but that's not really a big stylistic change for Garimbo. Both of those fighters, Kiefer Crosby and Rodriguez, are mainly strikers. They don't really offer much else. They're both going to be coming in looking for the knockout. They do have a slightly different striking style, but not a big change up for Garimbo stylistically. So I think that's going to be good for him. Garimbo is already 33 years old. He is 11-4 overall with 1 TKO victory, 6 submissions, and 4 decisions. Garimbo has a great team behind him now at MMA Masters. He's coming off his first UFC win. It really changed his life. He's documented that. His story's been all over. I'm sure you've seen it. where he got to meet The Rock. He's been making donations to his village back in Zimbabwe, and he's got a new house, and he moved his family here, and he's, like I mentioned, training at MMA Masters, which I think is a great camp and is going to be good for his style as well. But we'll have to see how that affects him. I think it's kind of going to go one of two ways. It's either going to, I think that he's going to get that taste of that life of luxury, and it could make him a little bit complacent, or it's just going to make him hungrier. He's now seen what a win can do for him, and he's really pushing the pace. And I think I'm leaning a little more towards that one. He's talked about wanting to make a title run. Pump the brakes on that a little bit. He's really at the bottom of this welterweight division still. But at 33 years old, he needs to make it happen now or never. He can't afford to lose to a guy like Rodriguez. Rodriguez is only 27 years old. He is 5-1 overall. All 5 of his wins have come by knockout. I've seen a couple different teams listed for Rodriguez, so I can't really guarantee where he's training, but from what I've seen, it seems like he's training at the MMA Lab. If so, that's a very good team. He's still only 27, so he's young and improving, but he's really only faced low-level competition besides his one loss, which was his short-notice UFC debut to Jack Della Maddalena. He is also 1-1 in the UFC. He's coming off a knockout victory over Michael Jackson, which I was really glad to see him knock that clown out. But Michael Jackson's really not a fighter. Pretty much anyone with any training should be able to beat Michael Jackson, besides CM Punk. Garimbo is coming into this fight as the minus 300 moderate favorite, while Rodriguez is sitting at a plus 235 moderate underdog. There is currently 1,858 Tapology picks. 74% of those are favoring Garimbo. Of those 74% picking him, 61% are favoring him to win by decision. Of the 26% going with Rodriguez, 76% of those are picking him to win by knockout. This is basically a striker versus grappler pairing, with Rodriguez being the striker and Garimbo being the grappler. Most of Garimbo's wins have been submissions, and I expect him to try and get this fight to the floor early. We've seen Garimbo get knocked out before, so I expect Rodriguez to come out, be swinging early and trying to get that finish. And Garimbo has shown a tendency to strike a little bit early, so that does worry me a bit. I've seen some people picking Rodriguez thinking he can kind of capitalize on that, but Rodriguez is really an undersized welterweight. He is only 5'9", with a 73-inch reach. He's tried to cut down to lightweight in the past. It just hasn't worked out for him for whatever reason. And I think that's going to go against him here. Garimbo is 6'1". He's got a 77-inch reach. So he's got a 4-inch reach advantage going into this fight. I think that's going to help him control the distance with his striking. And I really don't see him wasting too much time on the feet. I think he's going to wrestle early and often, get this to the floor. He's going to know he's got a big advantage there. It's a smaller cage at the apex, so closing that distance isn't going to be as difficult. And once he gets him to the floor, I think it's only a matter of time before he locks up a submission. So my official pick will be Themba Garimbo by submission in the first round. Next up on the card, we have a flyweight pairing, and this is another late notice matchup as well, as that Kazakh Maxim is taking on Charles Energy Johnson. Johnson is the one stepping in here on short notice. He is taking the fight to replace Nate Maness, and he has one of the dumbest nicknames and dumbest hairstyles in MMA at all. Both pretty damn terrible. In the red corner, Maxim is 29 years old. He is undefeated at 17-0 with 5 knockout wins, 7 submission victories, and 5 decisions on his record. He beat Tyson Nam in his UFC debut in his last outing. Tyson Nam is a veteran and a very tough opponent for a lot of fighters, but he's also aging, so I would have liked to seen a little more dominant victory there, but still a good win for him. He shoots for a lot of takedowns. He shot for 11 in that fight against Tyson Nam. He didn't succeed on a lot, but he definitely put them out there, and he is also pretty well-rounded, so he was able to still win the fight, even though he wasn't able to succeed with his takedowns. On the other side, Johnson is 33 years old. He is 13-6 overall with 6 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 4 decisions. I actually saw a lot of potential in Johnson early on when he came to the UFC, but it's plummeted very badly, and it's not getting any better with his age. He does have some tools to win this fight. He is the better striker, and he tends to kind of come on late in fights, so if he's able to shut down the takedowns and kind of the way that Tyson Nam did and maybe tire out Maxim, he might be able to come back later on. Maxim is the minus 190 slight favorite, while Johnson is a plus 160 slight underdog. There is currently 1,896 votes on Tapology for this fight, with 91% favoring Maxim. Of that 91%, 75% are picking him to win a decision. Of the 9% going with Johnson, 76% of those are picking him to win by decision. So not expecting a finish in this fight, and I am not either. So it seems like it's pretty straightforward. I can't trust picking Johnson anymore. He's coming off 3 straight losses over his last 3 fights. One was a close split decision to Ode Osborne. He then dropped a unanimous decision to Cody Durden. I actually thought he was going to win that fight, but he did not look good in it. And then he dropped another unanimous decision to Rafael Estevam, which he was starting to come on late in that fight, like he tends to, but I've seen people saying, if that was a 5-round fight, he probably could have came out and beat Estevam, but it's not. So he should have prepared better for a 3-round fight, and he didn't. So I have pretty much lost all faith in Charles Johnson. On the other side, Maxim, he is one of my breakout picks for the flyweight division, but I have some concerns with his overall game as well. Like I said, that Tyson Nam win, it wasn't super dominant, but it was a win in his debut against a tough veteran. So we're going to have to see how he looks in this fight for me to really get a gauge on him. But I think he's going to get the win here, and I think he is a solid prospect for this division. I think even without the short notice for Johnson, that this would be a tough stylistic pairing for Johnson. So I think Maxim is going to have more success with his wrestling than he did against Tyson Nam. Charles Johnson has struggled with defending takedowns recently, and Maxim really should be able to bank the first 2 rounds pretty easily. And I think he's well-rounded enough to hold off Johnson for that last round too, if Johnson tries to mount that comeback. But I think we're really going to see Azat Maxim kind of put a stamp on it and finish out the round strong. So my official pick is Azat Maxim by unanimous decision. Next up on this card, we have a rematch between Meatball Molly McCann and Diana the Warrior Princess Belbitsa. These two actually fought a while back. It was Belbitsa's UFC debut, and she took on McCann in the flyweight division and lost a unanimous decision. McCann is actually now moving down to strawweight and will fight Belbitsa again. McCann is 33 years old. She is 13-6 overall with 6 knockout victories and 7 decisions. McCann is really overhyped. She had 2 insane knockouts with spinning elbows, but both of those knockouts were over low-end fighters, and really most of her wins have come against bums. She scored that knockout of the year contender over Luana Carolina, who's also in this card, who I mentioned wasn't very good in my breakdown of her fight earlier on the card. And then she scored the other one over Hannah Goldie, which has also been cut from the UFC, and she wasn't very good either. On the other side, we have Belvitia, who is 27 years old. She's 15-8 overall with 6 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 5 decision victories. Belvitia is a little bit underrated in my eyes. She's young enough that she can still keep improving. We can see some strides in her game. And I think we did see a little bit of those in her last outing against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. But really, she's only beaten bums as well. And any good competition she has faced, she has lost to. McCann is currently sitting as a minus 250 moderate favorite, while Belvitia is a plus 205 moderate underdog. There is currently 1,928 Tapology picks on this fight. 75% of those are favoring McCann, with 74% of those expecting her to win by decision. Of the 25% picking Belvitia, looks like 72% of those are picking her to win by decision as well. So not really expecting a finish in this fight. And I'm not either, but I don't like those odds at all. Belvitia is easily the better grappler. McCann coming down to a lower weight class makes this a real mystery. She wasn't like a big women's flyweight, but she looks really thin from what I've seen of her leading up to this fight. And, power striking is her biggest strength. So she may lose a bit of that power dropping down a division. McCann won before. I think she can follow a similar game plan here and have more success in the striking. I think she's gotten a little more comfortable. But I'm far from confident in this pick. If Belvitia is able to get her to the ground, anything can happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Belvitia submits her. The way Molly McCann lost in her last outing was embarrassing. She was set up against Julia Stoliarenko for what should have been a showcase win for her, but instead she went to the ground and just basically dove right into the submission from Julia Stoliarenko. She actually was defending and then put herself in a worse position because she didn't know how to get out of it. Basically just handed the win to Stoliarenko. So if Belvitia can get in an advantageous position on the ground, I would not be shocked if she finishes McCann by submission. That being said, like I mentioned, Belvitia has only really beaten bums. I think McCann is slightly better. She's definitely the better striker. She's got more power, but dropping to 115, I don't know how that's going to hold up. But she was able to have some success with her wrestling in the first fight as well. She's a pretty decent offensive wrestler. So, the pick is still I think we're going to see the same outcome as the first fight. I'm going with my official pick to be Molly McCann by unanimous decision. Kicking off the main card, we have a shit fight in the welterweight division between Gilbert, the RGV bad boy Urbina, and Charles Chuck Buffalo Radke. This really isn't a good fight. These are two really low-end prospects in the division, and this is a deep division too, so don't really see either one of these guys going too far. In the red corner, we have Urbina, who is 27 years old. He is 7-2 overall with 2 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 3 decisions. He was on The Ultimate Fighter 29. He subbed Michael Gilmore, but then he got knocked out by Tresean Gore. He was fighting up a division that he doesn't need to be in. He can make 170, so there's a little bit of a, you can say, excuse for his losses there. He made his UFC debut in the Ultimate Fighter 29 finale when Trayshawn Gore got injured. Ended up fighting Brian Battle and losing by submission. He's since rebounded with a knockout win over Orion Kosi, and he's looking to make it 2 in a row here against Radke. Urbina is now training with the BMF Ranch. It's a pretty good team over there with Donald Cowboy Cerrone. He definitely could improve. He's only 27 years old. His brothers have been awful. They also came through the Ultimate Fighter and washed out really quickly. And I kind of see him going down the same path, but we will see. On the blue side, we have Radke, who is 33 years old. He is 8-3 overall with 3 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 3 decisions. He definitely has less upside, being that he's already 33 years old, and he's coming off a really underwhelming win in his UFC debut. He was fighting Blood Diamond, and that's the lowest level of competition you're going to get in the UFC. And instead of coming in and really making the point that he belongs here and Blood Diamond doesn't, he was content to just kind of wrestle him and cruise to a decision victory. I mean, a win is a win, but not a good look in your UFC debut. Urbina is a minus 165 slight favorite in this fight, with Radke being a plus 140 slight underdog. I think Urbina is being a little bit overrated from his last win. You know, he got that knockout win over Orion Kosi, but Kosi was openly injured that whole training camp. I think he even talked about it fight week that he was injured. He just didn't seem fully there going into that fight, and he wasn't that great of a prospect anyway, so it's not really a big win for him, even though he did finish him and he looked pretty decent. Radke is probably the better wrestler in this matchup, and I think he could pull off the upset by just cruising to another decision win here. If he can wrestle Urbina's a lanky guy who will look for submissions off his back, and I think he will spend too much time down there and allow Radke to just kind of rack up points on top and edge out the rounds. But with how offensive Urbina is, I think Radke's going to struggle. Radke is much smaller. He's 5'9", and Urbina is 6'3". Urbina does have a 3-inch reach advantage. And like I said, he's a very offensive fighter. He likes to throw. He's looking for the knockout. He's looking for the submission. I think that aggression is going to play a big factor. And I think Radke is going to break. I think we're going to see another stoppage win for Urbina here, probably in the second or third. So my official pick will be Gilbert Urbina by knockout in the second round. For the second fight on the main card, we move to the middleweight division, and this was probably the hardest fight on this card for me to predict. It is a middleweight pairing between Alyaskab, the Black Wolf Kizriev, and Mahmoud Makhmuradov. This is a pretty good fight, actually. Kizriev is undefeated. He's 14-0, and he has 5 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 5 decisions on his record, but he's extremely inactive. He has fought 3 times over the last 6 years. His last fight was almost 2 years ago, and it was in his UFC debut over Dennis Tululin. Before that, he did get a win on the Contender Series. That was about 3.5 years ago at this point. He's got decent wins, though. The guy he beat on the Contender Series was good. Dennis Tululin's not. That guy's pretty much a punching bag. He's not any good. But he also has a win over Huzumar Palhares, and he's fought some decent fighters outside of the UFC. But I think he's still a bit unproven, so this is going to be a big test for him going in against a guy like Muradov. Muradov is 33 years old. He is 26-8 overall with 17 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 6 decisions. At one point, I don't know if this is still true, he was the only MMA fighter signed by Floyd Mayweather's The Money Team. So the people had seen a lot of potential in this guy. He's currently 4-2 in the UFC. He's coming off a nice rebound win over Brian Barberena. That win was a little bit disappointing. I thought he would be able to get the late stoppage, but he started to slow down a little bit and ended up wrestling, which not what I wanted to see from him. But a win is a win. Going into this fight, he is the underdog. Kizriev is sitting at a minus 195 moderate favorite, and Muradov is a plus 165 slight underdog. Muradov is actually the bigger fighter here. Kizriev is 5'9", Muradov is 6'2", and he has a 1.5-inch reach advantage. He's the much better striker, and he's shown pretty solid takedown defense so far in the UFC. So this is not a terrible matchup for him. Honestly, ring rust could play a factor for Kizriev as well. He hasn't fought in almost 2 years. But the smaller cage at the apex probably favors Kizriev. It's going to allow him to kind of close the distance and start grappling easier. Honestly, I'm not confident in this pick at all. I was originally favoring Muradov. I was thinking that he could probably stay on the outside, land the harder shots, and do more damage, defend the takedowns enough to make it to the decision and edge it out. But with it being at the apex, I started to lean the other way. The smaller cage is probably going to play a factor here. Honestly, I kind of got swayed. I seen everyone else picking Kizriev as well. There's currently 1,946 picks on Tapology. 84% of those are favoring Kizriev, with 65% of those expecting him to win by submission. Of the 16% that have Muradov, 43% expect him to win a decision. So really, this one's kind of a coin toss. What version of Kizriev are we going to get? We don't know. He's been out for a long time. He's 33 years old, same as Muradov. Uh, even though Muradov looks older, I think he's been in there. He's the more active guy, so we really don't know what type of shape Kizriev's going to be in. I'm going to stick with the favorite. It's a tough call. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Muradov pulls it off, but I'm going to stick with the favorite. I think, especially with the smaller cage, it does kind of favor these boring fighters like Kizriev who are just kind of hold on to Muradov and ride out the decision by grappling him and trying to lay on him. So my official pick will be Alyaskab Kizriev by unanimous decision. Next up on the main card, we head to the women's flyweight division for a pretty interesting matchup that I don't care about at all. We have Vivi Araujo taking on Natalia Silva. Like I said, this is actually a pretty decent pairing, but finding a lot of the women's fights hard to care about. These two are top ranked, and Silva has a ton of potential, so it's not the worst fight ever. In the red corner, we have Araujo, who is 37 years old. She's 12-5 overall with 3 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 5 decisions. She's currently 6-4 in the UFC, with her best wins coming over Alexis Davis, Montana De La Rosa, Roxanne Modafferi, Andrea Lee, and Jennifer Maia. Araujo has a lot of power in her strikes. She throws big bombs, and she's got some decent wrestling and grappling as well, which will probably be her best path to victory in this fight. She is taking on Natalia Silva, who is 26 years old. She is 16-5-1 overall, with 5 knockout wins, 7 submission wins, 3 decisions, and a disqualification. She's young at 26 years old. She's constantly improving. She's got a decent team with her. She trains the same team with top-ranked middleweight Paulo Costa. She is super talented, and as you can tell by her record, she is a finisher, which is not that common for women's MMA. But she has 5 knockouts, 7 submissions, and she can be pretty entertaining to watch. She's got a ton of upside as well, and if she wins this fight, she's going to be on her way towards title contention. Silva is currently sitting at a minus 290 moderate favorite, with Araujo at a plus 235 moderate underdog. There's 1,971 Tapology picks at the moment, with 92% of those favoring Silva. Of those 92%, 81% are expecting her to win a decision. Of the 8% going with Araujo, 74% of those are taking her to win by decision. Most are expecting this fight to go to the scorecards. I am as well, but with both of these fighters, you really can't be that sure of it. Silva is a finisher, like I mentioned, and Araujo actually has a lot of power and some crafty submissions at times. So, like I said, pretty interesting matchup. Still struggling to care about it that much, but we'll see how it goes. I think Silva has all the tools to win this fight, but Araujo is a crafty veteran, so Silva can't be looking at these odds and seeing that everyone's favoring her and thinking that this is going to be a cakewalk, because if she does, Araujo will make her pay for it. Like I mentioned, Araujo has big power in her shots. She will throw them too. She throws power shots, and she's got decent wrestling and grappling, which I think would probably be her best path here to sort of slow Silva down, get a hold of her, and just kind of control this fight. But I don't see it happening for her. Araujo just doesn't have enough output. She throws those big power shots, but there's not combinations. There's not setups. It's just one, two single shots at a time. And I just don't think that's going to be enough to catch Silva unless she's really underestimating her and just really makes a big mistake. Silva sets a much higher pace. I think she's going to control the tone of this fight with her striking, and I think we just see her continue that for the full 15 minutes. My pick is going to be Natalia Silva by unanimous decision. Next up on the main card, we head back to the welterweight division for a pairing between Randy Rude Boy Brown and Muslim King of Kung Fu Salikov. This fight was actually originally scheduled to take place at UFC 296 in December, but Brown had to pull out and it was rescheduled to this card here. In the red corner, we have Brown, who is 33 years old. He is 17-5 overall with 6 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 6 decision victories. He is 11-5 in the UFC currently. His best wins are over Warley Alves, Alex Oliveira, Chaos Williams, and Francisco Trinaldo. He is a rangy striker, but he can fight everywhere. We've seen him, get some submission wins as well. He's dangerous no matter where the fight goes, but in this one, I do expect him to use his rangy striking and try and stay on the outside. He is taking on Muslim Salikov, who is 39 years old. He is 19-4 overall with 12 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 4 decision victories. He is 6-3 in the UFC, with his best wins coming over Elizeu Zaleski, Francisco Trinaldo, and Andre Fialho. Brown is currently sitting as a minus 235 moderate favorite, with Salikov at a plus 195 moderate underdog. There is 1,913 picks on Tapology currently. 83% of those are favoring Brown, with 79% expecting him to win a decision. Of the 17% taking Salikov, 47% of those are picking him to win by decision. This is a decent pairing. Both fighters are strikers, so it could make for some decent moments. I actually like the style of Salikov, especially with him being that type of Russian fighter. We don't get to see that style out of a lot of Russians nowadays. They're mostly more boring wrestlers, but he can actually be a pretty entertaining striker himself. I don't like the age of Salikov. I think we've seen him start to decline a little bit. He's 39 years old, and I think that's going to play a factor in this fight. Brown is the type of fighter to make fights closer than they need to be. So it does worry me picking him a little bit because Salikov only need one mistake to really change the outcome of this fight in his favor in a big way. But I'm still going with Brown. Brown's not really the type of fighter to push the pace and hunt for a finish, but I think that also is going to benefit him here. I think he needs to stay on the outside, just pick his shots, frustrate Salikov, you know, look for counters when he can, but just kind of continue to pick him apart from the outside. They are at the apex, keep that in mind. So the smaller cage might actually help Salikov kind of close the distance and look to land some shots of his own. But I just see him being too slow, too small. I mean, Salikov has a 8-inch reach disadvantage in this fight, and just too slow. I think he's just going to be too old and too slow at this point for Randy Brown to end up getting caught. And I think we're just going to see Randy kind of in cruise control, picking his shots for the full 15 minutes. So my official pick is Randy Rude Boy Brown by unanimous decision. In the co-main event for the night, we head to the lightweight division and get a pair of top-ranked contenders. We have Hanato Money Moicano taking on Drew Dober. This is an old school striker versus grappler pairing here. We have Moicano, who is 34 years old. He's 17-5-1 overall with 10 submission victories and 7 decisions. He is currently 9-5 in the UFC. His best wins have come over Ismail Bonfim, Zubaira Tukhugov, Calvin Kattar, Cub Swanson, and Brad Riddell. On the other side, we got Drew Dober. He is 35 years old with 11 knockout wins, 9 submissions, and 7 decisions. He is 27-12 overall. Dober is 13-8 in the UFC. His best wins have been over Jamie Varner, Josh Berkman, Nazrat Hakparast, and Bobby Green. Moicano is currently sitting at a minus 140 slight favorite, with Drew Dober being a plus 120 near even underdog. There's currently 2,049 Tapology votes on this fight, and it's currently dead even with each fighter having 50% of the vote. Of the 50% taking Moicano, 69% of those expect him to win by decision, and of the 50% taking Dober, 85% of those expect him to win by knockout. It's pretty clear that both fighters have a clear path to victory here. Moicano has been knocked out 3 times in his 5 losses, and Dober has been submitted 4 times in his 12 losses. So, striker versus grappler, they each know what they need to do here. And really, with them both having such a clear path to victory, I'm not super confident in the pick. I've seen people make the case for Dober, and I can definitely see it. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up knocking Moicano out, but I'm actually leaning towards Moicano. If you look on paper at the stats, Moicano is actually the better striker. He throws more volume, he lands with a higher accuracy, he absorbs less significant strikes, and he's better defensively. Now, paper stats don't always tell you the story. Dober is obviously the better striker here. He is much more fluid and comfortable with his shots, more technical striker, and definitely more power. Moicano's never even finished a fight with strikes. Dober has a ton of knockouts. But I think the point there is that Moicano can be competitive on the feet, but I think if it goes to the floor, Dober's going to be in big trouble. So I think Moicano can kind of compete with Dober in his best area, and I don't think Dober can compete with Moicano in his best area. So that's what makes me lean towards Moicano. I think there's going to be a fun first round as these two kind of just slug it out, kind of put on a war in the first round. And then I think in the second round, Dober is going to slow down just a little bit, and Moicano is going to be able to get him to the mat and lock up something to end it. So my official pick will be Hanato Money Moicano by submission in the second round. It's time for the main event between Roman Dolidze, Roman the Caucasian Dolidze, versus Nassourdine Russian sniper Imavov. This is a big fight for the middleweight division and for both fighters. Dolidze is 35 years old. He's 12-2 overall with 7 KOs, 3 submissions, and 2 decisions. He's currently 6-2 in the UFC. His best wins have been over Phil Hawes and Jack Hermanson. Dolidze really has some crazy knockout power, but he's actually a grappler and he's got a dangerous submission game. He's really just a hulking fighter. He will come after the knockout and he will get to the submissions in violent ways as well. So he's a really explosive type fighter. On the other side, we have Imavov, who is 27 years old. He has 12-4 overall with 5 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 3 decisions. He's currently 4-2 in the UFC. His best wins have been over Ian Heinisch, Edmund Shabazian, and Joaquin Buckley. He is a very technical and smart fighter. It's a very contrast of styles here between Dolidze, who is that kind of hulking, smash you type of fighter, compared to Imavov, who is the exact opposite. He's going to pick his shots and do everything clean. He doesn't want to get into a brawl. Imavov is currently sitting at a minus 150 slight favorite, with Dolidze being a plus 125 slight underdog. I actually expected Dolidze to be the favorite here, so I'm a little bit surprised to see Imavov as the favorite. Dolidze is getting older. He is 35, and I think that could play a factor in the odds as well as in the fight. He really needs this win to get back on track and stay relevant in the division. He's coming off a loss, decision loss to Marvin Vettori, and another loss here is going to send him tumbling down. And I don't know if he just has the time left in his career to get back into title contention if he takes a loss here. So very important fight for him to get a win. Pretty important for Imavov as well. He's coming off a loss and a no contest, so he hasn't won a fight in about a year and a half at this point. He lost to a decision to Sean Strickland, and then he had that no contest with Chris Curtis where there was an accidental headbutt that ended up ending the fight. This is in the Apex, so the smaller cage plays a factor here as well. And I think that might favor Dolidze. He wants to close the distance and make it ugly, make it a brawl, and get the grappling going if he can. I see this fight being pretty similar to some of the other fights that were on the card earlier, namely the Viviane Araujo versus Natalia Silva fight and the Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikov fight. Both have all three of those fights have the younger fighter who's got potential and a lot of upside, who needs to prove themselves against the more veteran fighter who is dangerous and who wants to close the distance and use their power. All three of those fights are very similar in the style of fight that I expect to see, and I'm actually favoring the younger prospect in all of those because I just think the way that those fights are going to play out, unless the veteran experience comes through and the younger fighter makes a mistake, they really have the tools to win these matchups. All three of them, Araujo, Salikov, and Dolidze, they just don't have enough output. Dolidze has a tendency to let rounds slip away from him. He knows that he can get that finish, so he's hunting for it, and he's not worried about winning rounds. And I think that's going to be a big mistake for him here. Imavov, despite having all those finishes, I don't really see him as much of a finisher. He's more of that technical fighter, and I think that's going to play to his favor here, though. It is a 5-round fight, so he can't make mistakes or get complacent, even even throughout the entire fight. So he can get to the 4th round, and he could have won the first 3, but all it's going to take is one mistake, and Dolidze will put him away. So he's got to be at the top of his game for the full 25 minutes here, or else Dolidze is going to get him. But I think we'll end up seeing Dolidze down 3 rounds really before he even realizes it. And then he's not going to have enough time or energy to come back. I think, Imavov's going to pick his shots, really outwork him, and Dolidze is just going to end up letting these rounds slip by. I would like to see Imavov kind of, the longer the fight goes, start to push the pace, put it on him more. With Dolidze being that low output type of fighter, I think he could really turn it on and probably get him out of there if he tried hard enough. But I think we'll end up seeing Imavov stay more cautious because Dolidze is so dangerous and just kind of ride out the full 25 minutes. So my official pick for the main event will be Nassourdine Russian Sniper Imavov by unanimous decision. And that's a wrap for episode 3 of the MMA Oracles podcast. I have been your host, Jack Moon. I appreciate you as always for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow. I am at the MMA Oracles pretty much everywhere. Appreciate you listening either on Spotify, YouTube, or Rumble. Do apologize about the delay in this episode. It's coming out a little bit later in the week. Um, been dealing with some personal issues as well as just haven't been that enthusiastic about this card. It has a lot of shit fights, and honestly, if you miss a bunch of them, you're not really going to be missing much. Let me go over my locks and parlay and underdog picks and all that good stuff here before we get out of here. My locks for the card are Temba Garimbo, Azat Maxim, and Natalia Silva. They're all pretty big favorites. If you throw them into a parlay, you're getting plus 162, which is still plus money, so not too bad. None of my parlays have hit so far this year. We've only had a couple cards, so hopefully that's going to turn around, but take this with a grain of salt. I'm coming off the worst night ever of picks for myself in my extensive background of picking fights. Underdogs that I have on this card, I actually didn't officially pick any. I'm going with all favorites here. There's a couple that are really close. I wouldn't be surprised if Muradov pulled it off. I wouldn't be surprised if Dober pulled it off. I wouldn't be surprised if Blake Builder pulled it off. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these underdogs pulled it off, honestly. But yeah, official picks, I went all favorites on this card. Best fights of the night, Medeiros versus Quinones. I think that's going to be a fun one. Both fighters are strikers. Should be a back and forth battle to the end. Blake Builder versus Zhang Yang Li. I'm actually interested in that fight. I think Lee is a pretty solid prospect, and if he can beat Builder, he's definitely someone I'm going to be keeping an eye on in that division. And then the best fight of the night, Money Moicano versus Drew Dober. To me, that's the real main event. I'm more excited about that fight than I am for the main event. I expect a finish in that fight as well. Um, yeah, that's honestly the best fight on this card. Um, yeah, thank you for listening again. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow. And I am signing out.